I don't want to watch this Jimmy Dore thing. I hope I don't get
So they indicted Trump, and here is the
whacked
district
with
attorney
copyright or something because I know
in
he.
full calling DA Willis. She's gonna tell you. She's gonna tell you what Donald Trump did. He illegally tried to overthrow the election, ladies and gentlemen, with his words. Watch this.
The indictment alleges that rather than abide by Georgia's legal process for election challenges.
I know, Tupac. The friggin' allergies have been killing me. I guess it's the pollen mixed with my cat's fur. It's been brutal.
Defendants engaged in a criminal racketeering enterprise to overturn Georgia's presidential election result. Subsequent to the indictment, as is the normal process in Georgia law, the grand jury issued arrest warrants for those who are charged. I am giving the defendants the opportunity to voluntarily surrender no later than noon.
So there used to be an agreement among the political class that you didn't prosecute your political enemies once you got power. And they used to be afraid that Donald Trump was the guy doing this. And now they're doing it. This is the fourth. This is a completely ridiculous, felonious.
Which has been my whole point, is that we never used to prosecute this sort of thing before. Like Hillary did the same kind of stuff. That's the whole point. It's not that I'm like, oh, Trump didn't do anything wrong. I don't really know if he did anything wrong, but all I know is that if it was anybody else doing it, they wouldn't be charging them. So, I mean, people just can't, they don't understand that. They can't, like, see past their hatred.
This law indictment. Of course, you can get a grand jury to indict a ham sandwich. We all know that. That's what they did. And they're trying to say that Donald Trump used his words to overthrow an election. You're allowed to do that. The first thing you have to believe is that Donald Trump is lying. So if he believed that there was fraud in the 2020 election, then everything he did is okay. Everything they're accusing him of is based on the fact that he knew it was on the up and up. Donald Trump knew it was a lie that the 2020 election was fraudulent,
which they have no
that
evidence
lie,
of. So
he pushed it, and then he pressured electors and other people to flip their votes and find votes for him. Well, if you really think that the election was stolen from you and there was voter fraud, you would think there's lots of more thousands of votes for you out there for people to find.
right.
So this is what they're trying to get him on. It's ridiculous. This is the fourth completely. Not that they might not convict him. That has nothing to do with whether he should be prosecuted or not.
Exactly.
That has nothing to do with it. Whether they're going to convict him or not. There's nothing to any of these cases. They're criminalizing free speech. Watch this, Kurt.
He's really flipped.
By the way, if Trump had really done what she said, tried to overturn that election illegally, that would have been great, because maybe it would have avoided the Ukraine war, the one that we're paying for. Or maybe if Donald Trump was president and they made him do the Ukraine war, at least people might be a little more skeptical of it.
True. That's a good point. Imagine if it was Donald Trump in office right now and they still forced the Ukraine war to happen. How the hell would these lefties be covering it? I mean, imagine how different the rhetoric would be from the left if Trump was in power right now and we were in this Ukraine war was going on. It'd be totally different. Totally different. Oh my gosh. It's just wild to even like think about it. And try to think like what would they be saying about it right now? It's just these people, man. They blow my mind. It blows my mind. I can't imagine being that much of just a sycophant. Yeah, I guess you're right too, Luck. It's possible that they would still back it. They'd probably back it, but then still, every time Trump did something that they could like get on him about with it, they would still attack him for it and say he's not doing this right, he's not doing that right, he should have done this, should have done that. They'd probably, you know what they would be doing? They'd probably be attacking him, saying that he's not doing enough, is what they would do. As opposed to with Biden, where they're like, you know, oh, Biden's doing amazing. Ukraine's gonna win. With Trump, they'd be like, he needs to do more. Ukraine's gonna lose. Why isn't he doing more? We need to send them even more money. I'm covered in cat fur. I'm a cat fur off my.
But he didn't. So so let's remember what the Democrats did.
He's got the right attorney general in position to do it. We now know they really have been trying to gin up criminal prosecutions and criminal investigations into the president's perceived enemies.
This is when they thought Trump was doing it to Joe Biden. Now Joe Biden's doing it to Trump. And it sounds like they're describing what Joe Biden and the Justice Department and all these DAs are doing to Donald Trump. Tell me if it doesn't.
He's got the right attorney general in position to do it. We now know they really have been trying to gin up criminal prosecutions and criminal investigations into the president's perceived enemies. Politically motivated persecution, right? Courtesy of Bill Barr. I'll roll in the FBI on you. That's how banana republics work, right?
The home of the 45th
Wow.
president of the United States has been raided by the FBI.
Mr. Trump is using the Justice Department to go after his perceived enemies. I feel worried about the prospect of the Justice Department being used as a tool of this president or any. In our little banana republic, any capable prosecutor can get a grand jury to hand down an indictment of something as innocent as a ham sandwich.
Today, an indictment was unsealed, charging Donald J. Trump.
Breaking news on former President Trump. He's been indicted for the 4th time in 5 months.
Bill Barr, on the president's behalf, is weaponizing the Justice Department to go after the president's enemies. When you win an election, you don't seek to just prosecute the losing side.
The president using the Justice Department as a weapon to get what he wants.
Department of Justice is totally politicized.
Sicking the Department of Justice on political opponents, threatening to imprison his political rival, Banana Republic style.
Trying to exact revenge against all of his enemies, tin pot dictator in a banana republic.
Is acting more like a banana republic dictator.
He's using government resources to go after his political opponent.
Essentially, we are a banana republic. That we are seeking to have a bogus and criminal investigation into a political opponent.
And that's using the Department of Justice to also target Trump's political opponent for nefarious reasons. This is a massive abuse of power and a betrayal of our values.
Wow. And this is what you can't even explain this to them. Like, they just don't. It's like they shut down. They don't understand. I try to explain to them, like, you understand that all the exact opposite has happened, right? Like, if this was reversed, this is the kind of stuff they'd be saying. Also, like, when Hillary does this stuff, when she gets the electors, nothing's done. She did campaign finance violations with the Russia dossier or whatever. And she gets a slap in the wrist. She just gets a fine. But Trump, pays off some woman that says that they had an affair. And he's going to go to jail for that, for a felony.
The President of the United States is targeting a family member of a political opponent. This is a type of thing that happens in a banana republic.
They love that
trying
word.
to take out a political rival in Joe Biden.
Criminally investigating an American political rival, someone the president is worried about losing to in the next election.
To investigate my principal opponent or a principal opponent.
Who is this Grabian? I want to find this video. The guy that made it. Grabian. Yeah, here we go. Nice. Here, I'll post it in HB's Discord. So we have
in the upcoming election. Houston, we have a problem.
Don't you think that's something that should be investigated when the incumbent political party opens a counterintelligence investigation on the candidate of the opposing party?
We know Trump is itching to politicize the Justice Department, and the Attorney General has been super shady.
The president is weaponizing the Department of Justice to bring cases against his enemies. The Department of Justice is in an existential crisis.
Again, it's yet another example of the Justice Department basically
presidency losing all of its independence in this administration.
This is now about corrupting the next election. And for me, this was...
The only difference is that it didn't take the Biden administration to corrupt the three-letter agencies, right? Whereas they thought with Trump that he was the one that was there. I mean, generally, the three-letter agencies have the president led by the neck, right? It just so happened that with Trump, that was not the case. And that's why they don't want him in there. Because how are they going to keep perpetuating their never-ending wars if they don't have the president on a leash? And they've worked so hard, like we were saying earlier, the Bushes and the Clintons and all those people that for the whole beginning of the 2000s have had a stranglehold on the world, really. And they worked so hard to get all these people together, and all these three-letter agencies, these people are part of that whole group, that quote-unquote deep state that's emerged in the early 2000s. So if they lose that now,
crossing the red line.
A president who is actively trying to potentially steal the upcoming election.
But to try to take out a political rival. The end goal being 2020.
Donald Trump and his attorney general are using the Justice Department. The only difference between this and a banana republic is that Trump does not eat fruit.
The 2020 election is really the last chance we have to stop our system from fully sliding into a corrupt banana republic.
Bill Barr has done everything that Donald Trump has wanted him to do. Yeah, we're living in a banana republic right now.
When you start using the Justice Department to go after your enemies, that's very, very dangerous.
You know what I don't understand is how people can watch this stuff and hear them literally use the same exact phrases on like 20 different places and not be like, that seems a little sketchy to me. I don't understand how you just literally repeat what they say. Is it because they think that these people are smart? So if they say it, they sound like a smart person? I mean, that has to be it, right? They figure, these people are wealthy and important and popular and they're intelligent and they know what they're talking about. So if I just repeat what they say, then that makes me all those things.
The Department of Justice to go after his enemies in any way that he can.
Having the head of the chief federal law enforcement agency essentially working on his behalf to investigate a political rival.
To investigate the family of a political opponent, basically banana republic behavior.
We're no better than some, some banana republic.
And he's using the abuse of power and every element of the presidency to try to do something to smear me.
We just have to demonstrate that he will not take power if he does run.
So I appreciate Tom Elliott tweeting that out. But this should really scare you because everything that they were saying on that video is actually happening right now.
Yep.
That's what's happening. We became a banana republic. The establishment wants to criminalize their only person who's going to oppose them. And they would be doing the same thing if Bernie Sanders somehow grabbed power. Or if Cornel West was able to grab power, they would be doing the same thing to Cornel West. They would be calling him a criminal. They would be criminalizing his following.
They already called him a spy.
They already called him. They've called him white
Russian
supremacist.
asset.
They call him Russian asset. They already did that. So that's the playbook, and this is the new playbook: is the establishment, not only in America but in other countries, the establishment criminalizes their political opponents and puts them in jail. And that was Democrats. That was 3 minutes straight of Democrats warning you about the thing that they're doing right now. And Donald Trump says a large, complex, detailed, but irrefutable report on the presidential election fraud, which took place in Georgia, is almost complete. And
I saw this the other day. I saw, well, first of all, I saw the article about the fraud that they had actually uncovered bunch of ballots and guns and stuff in these businesses ran by Democrats in a bunch of different states, but especially in Georgia.
Presented by me at a major news conference at 11 a.m. on Monday of next week in Bedminster, New Jersey. Based on the results of this conclusive report, all charges should be dropped against me and others. There will be a complete exoneration. They never went after those that rigged the election. They only went after those that fought to find the riggers. Now, there's something really uncomfortable about riggers in all caps like that, I gotta say. Not as uncomfortable as, say, I don't know, putting a medal on a Nazi at Disney World like the great Jon Stewart did. Here's what Glenn Greenwald has to say about it.
That Donald Trump did exactly that was illegal.
So he's trying to find out, what did Donald Trump do that it's illegal?
We have to prove Trump honestly thought he didn't win. The guy who has probably never in his life
thought he
it was
lost
his
anything.
fault, or
Never took responsibility for
which
a
you all
failure.
know and criticize him
Yes.
for. But you think this time
he knew secretly he was a
truth
loser.
inside.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this is what Glenn says. What did he do?
That Donald Trump did exactly that was illegal. He definitely sued in court multiple times and lost, which is absolutely his right to do. He told Mike Pence what he heard from his lawyers was Mike Pence's ability to do, even if it wasn't, which is...
So Trump's lawyers told him that Mike Pence could overturn the election, and so Trump leaned on Mike Pence to exercise what Trump thought his power was, which, again, not illegal.
Riggers.
As that vice presidential role.
Which
and
you're
reject
rigging, riggers.
as certified results, ones that he regarded had evidence of fraud, and send them back to the states. He arranged for an alternative state of electors to be ready to be anointed in the event he could prove that there was fraud. Well, what about this is criminal? Which of these steps are illegal?
I don't know. Nobody's been able to tell me yet.
You really have to stretch the law to make it into a crime.
Yeah, well,
I'm
you
not
have
saying
to.
it's impossible.
It's not. No, it's not even the law. They
This
just
is
have
what
to
I've been saying
frame
from the
it.
beginning. If we're going to abandon decades worth of consensus among
To frame it.
Washington elites,
Literally
and the
just.
political and media class,
Literally, the only thing they have to do is just use the right words. If they just say fraud and illegal, that's it. That's it. That's all these people need to buy into it. And if you get enough people to buy into it, then you can just convict them. Because who's going to say anything? Who's going to say anything? Now, you might get pushback from Trump. They might actually bring it to court and try to fight it. But I mean, in the public's eye, if everybody gets on board with it, he's guilty in the public eye anyway. So who gives a fuck?
The consensus he's talking
These
about.
people are going to get us killed, dude. These 7 IQ idiots are going to get us killed.
That we're not going to try to criminalize our political opponents. That's the consensus. That once someone gains power, they won't immediately try to throw their political opponents in jail. That's what he means. They didn't put Dick Cheney and George Bush in jail, and they admitted to ordering a torture program.
Yep. But Donald Trump's so much worse, right?
Committed war crimes every day of his life.
Yep.
Presided over the drone program.
Yep.
Which killed 90% innocent women, children, grandmothers, grandfathers, babies. He was doing that.
But all the left can say is, oh yeah, they should be in jail. They should be brought up on charges too. But that doesn't mean that Trump shouldn't be. That doesn't mean we should just let Trump go. Like, bro, this is what you set a precedent already that you don't charge these people, obviously. And now all of a sudden you charge Trump for literally little baby bullshit levels of stuff.
With arms and legs over the age of 15.
90% innocent people
That
who
ain't
killed
collateral
him.
damage.
And I hate Trump, dude. I wish we could get a real populist candidate. But it's just never going to happen. And if you start doing this stuff, like you do this with Trump, it's not even about Trump. It's about what happens after this now. I mean, people don't even understand the precedent that it sets to start doing this. Or like Keebler's saying, what's going to happen if they do convict him? He's going to fight it. But what does that do? What does that do to all the culture surrounding it? Or to each side of it. Like, how's everybody going to act after this, dude? What actions are going to take place after this? Or even during it? I mean, we haven't even really gotten into it yet. And you already had the woman the other day that was threatening a judge. I mean, there's a lot of unhinged people that support Trump. I mean, there's a lot of unhinged people on the other side, too. But there's like a lot of unhinged people involved in this thing. A lot of people are just unhinged, period. And you set this precedent? I mean, what is that going to turn our elections into?
That's on purpose.
If they got a terrorist, that was collateral.
That was. Okay. So that's the consensus he's talking about, is that even though they're all war criminals, all of them, every president in my lifetime.
Yep.
You don't prosecute your political enemies, and that was the consensus. Well, now this is over because the donor class hates Donald Trump.
Right.
By the way, Donald Trump was one of them.
Yep.
So this idea that somehow Donald Trump is a horrible liar, criminal, some kind of crazy criminal who needed to be indicted 4 times, he's been in public life for like 70 years. They gave him his own network television show for 10 years straight where Hollywood celebrities would genuflect at his altar, and they weren't even allowed to use his first name. That's how much reverence they had for him, Mr. Trump. They gave him Emmy nominations. Every politician wanted to be seen with him. The Clintons and his kids are best friends. They all go to each other's weddings. They all play golf with each other.
You know Oprah?
Yeah. So this idea that somehow Donald Trump, all of a sudden, in his 75th, 6th, or 7th year of...
He brings up a good point there, which makes me wonder if this is all just AstroTurf. Like, every part of it. Like, Trump is playing along, too. And it's just to set the precedent that this is how we're running things now. This is what's happening now. You can't... It's like to send a message. And I've heard people say that before. I know it's mad conspiratorial, but... I wouldn't put anything past these people at this point. I want to believe that Trump is genuine, but it's... I mean, this is wild. This is crazy, dude.
Life became some kind of unbelievable criminal that they have to prosecute right now. Of course, doesn't pass the smell test whatsoever.
You understand the crime here. It's something they all believe in. They'll tell you over and over again. It's called staying in your lane.
That's right.
And so even the great Howard Stern's like, oh, if he said I'm not going to run for president anymore, I would hug him right now.
That's right.
Like, you're supposed to stay. So, for example, don't research anything. That's not your lane.
That's right. You're supposed to let Dr. Fauci look it up for you.
It's called stovepiping in the intelligence community.
That is right. So let's hear what Glenn has to say.
Consensus that I have not shared, that I have rejected, but I only want it abandoned if it's going to be applied legally to equally to everybody. I don't want it to be a one-time only exemption for Trump.
Right. Right.
I've been arguing since the beginning of writing about politics that the media's fraudulent neutrality or posture of not having opinions or not being subjective was devastating to journalism because everybody knows it's a fraud.
Well...
And then, of course, sometimes as a journalist, you have to take sides if one side is saying something untrue and the other side is saying something true.
Yes, but like we were talking about when I did the Sitch and Adam debate, or the Sitch and Adam versus Destiny thing, is that to be neutral, you don't actually have to be neutral. But as long as you present both sides of the argument, that's considered neutral. Like with the Trump stuff, you say, these are the charges. These are the events that actually took place, but you don't use any coded language in it. And then you say, this is Trump's defense. This is what he says. And that's it. That's a neutral article right there.
The example I always use was...
It used to be that you had articles and then you had opinion pieces. And it seems like these days, everything's just an opinion piece. That's it. They all have to put their little... To try to get their 15 minutes, they have to put their opinions into everything they write now, because otherwise you don't get any notoriety or recognition for the things that you write.
use of...
And it's not about like being a good writer anymore, but how much shit can you stir up?
Torture methods by George Bush and Dick Cheney that had been regarded as torture in every single jurisdiction, including American jurisdictions, for decades. And I don't just mean waterboarding. The torture that was used by the United States as part of the war on terror went way beyond that. All kinds of stress positions, keeping people in cold, depriving them of sleep for days at a time to disorient them. Classic techniques of torture that had been regarded as torture and prosecuted as torture by the American authorities for decades. And then simply because George Bush found a couple of lawyers, neocon lawyers in the Justice Department to say it wasn't torture, the media refused to call it torture on the grounds that they shouldn't take sides. And they would start to call it harsh interrogation techniques because that was the terminology the Bush Justice Department had adopted. And I always was against that. Of course, the media needs to have an allegiance to the truth, and sometimes that does mean you say that one side is wrong and the other side is right. They obviously have abandoned this feigned neutrality. They don't pretend at all to be neutral. It's just their loyalty is not to the truth. It's just to defeating Donald Trump. It's not that they've abandoned this practice of feigning neutrality or being objective to a flaw. It's a one-time only exemption for Donald Trump. Everything has been transformed as a result of Donald Trump. Every profession, every institution that has anything to do with politics has abdicated their role in order to do that. And that's the same here. This does not mean, none of these indictments mean that we're now going to start to have a very wide and permissive interpretation
and that's the
of law
problem.
to start.
That is the biggest problem with this. Because if the situation was different and it was obvious that it meant that we're going to hold politicians accountable from here on out, or we're going to go into the backlog and start charging people with the crimes that they've committed, or we're going to start getting these corrupt politicians out of power, I would be fucking jumping for joy. I would be on board 100%. But it's so transparent that that's not the case, and this is going to be a one-time thing to get somebody out of the way that they don't want in power and they don't want around. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up dead in a couple of years.
Indicting top-level politicians. If it were, I would look at it differently.
Yeah.
I would still only favor prosecution where someone has actually committed clear crimes.
Right.
You cannot go around charging popular politicians with crimes absent clear criminality, because if you do that, you're going to destroy the credibility of the justice system and of the legal authorities.
And that's what's happening right now. They've destroyed the credibility of the justice system and the legal authority in this country.
Well, I
they
mean,
did that.
They don't.
That's what's happening.
They haven't had credibility for a long, long, long time.
But I say this to Glenn. Well, what's
It's
so
like the
hard for Glenn to
70s.
understand, really, right? If we stretch the law to get Trump, then we'll have a permanently gaping loose law that we could then use against you. It's a win-win, really. It's a win-win, really.
We need more gaping laws.
We need more gaping, loosened laws. And let me just show you this. Michael Tracy says, can someone explain to me why it's such a frightening menace to democracy that large numbers of GOP voters think the 2020 election was illegitimate, but supermajorities of Democrats think Russia literally hacked the voting
Michael
machines
Tracy's
in 2016 actually
been doing good
strengthens
on this,
democracy somehow. He points to this. So there's a supermajority. 67% of Democrats think that it is probably true or definitely true that Russia tampered with the vote tallies in order to elect Donald Trump.
Isn't it the
That's
same
question.
thing?
Did Russia tamper with vote tallies? 67% of Democrats think they literally flip votes in voting machines.
Well, they called it hacking the election.
Yes.
And I would ask, what do you mean? Did they hack the machines?
They say yes.
Well, the people at the time, they were going, no. I guess they thought he hacked Hillary's emails and that's hacking the election. They weren't saying, like, this is deliberately confusing. So when it's all said and done, it's like crossing state lines.
No, but there were all those. Yeah, there were all those stories that the mainstream media ran.
This is what they always. This is what they always do. They muddy the water so that they can get a propaganda phrase out there that can mean one thing to one person or one thing to another person to get more people on board. Because if you give it a legitimate, like, solid meaning that means one thing, some people are going to be like, oh, I don't know if I buy that. But if you say a propaganda phrase and then you say, well, it means this, but it could mean this, but it could mean this, then more people, it has a broader appeal to people and people will jump on board more. That's why they do that.
Russia has cracked into our voting rolls. Remember, I don't know if you remember that. Oh yeah, first it was 17 states voting rolls, and they got there. Then it was 41, and then it turns out that was all a lie. That was all made up by the FBI and was repeated by the mainstream media and the Young Turks and people with them.
I'd like to find some sources for after when Hillary lost. To see what steps she actually took after the fact. Because I know that they claimed fraud. I know that she did have a separate state electors set up. I know that she did go to Republican politicians and ask them not to certify. And I know that what was the last thing she did? I just slipped my mind. Oh, they were messing with the Electoral College, right? Saying that the Electoral College stuff should be thrown out, or they should abolish the Electoral College and stuff. It was a huge narrative after that. And they were spying on them. But I'd like to know what else they were doing. And this is what I say to people on the left that I argue with this about. I say, if you had people releasing phone calls with Hillary Clinton that were talking about the election in 2016, you think that there wouldn't be stuff in those phone calls that's just as bad as the stuff that Trump said? The only reason we're talking about Trump is because people had it out for him so bad that they've released phone calls with him about the stuff that he was saying. If you went back in time and went to any presidential candidate that lost so closely at such a slim margin, I'm sure if you go and listen to all the phone calls that they had with people involving that election, that you could easily build a case on anybody.
MSNBC contracts and all those people.
Yeah, right.
And the Democrats couldn't say it enough that they thought that the voting was rigged.
Continue to think that our voting machines are too vulnerable.
Where researchers have repeatedly demonstrated that ballot recording machines and other voting systems are susceptible to tampering.
Even hackers with limited prior knowledge, tools, and resources are able to breach voting machines in a matter of minutes.
In 2018, electronic voting machines in Georgia and Texas deleted votes for certain candidates or switched votes from one candidate to another.
The biggest seller of voting machines is doing something that violates Cybersecurity 101, directing that you install remote access software, which would make a machine like that, a magnet for fraudsters and hackers.
These voting machines can be hacked quite easily.
You could easily hack into them. It makes it seem like all these states are doing different things, but in fact, 3 companies are controlling this.
It is the individual voting machines that pose some of the greatest risks.
There are a lot of states that are dealing with antiquated machines, right, which are vulnerable to being hacked.
Workers were able to.
No, whoa! That's something a conspiracy theory. No, they're not. They're very safe machines. They cannot be accessed the internet. They cannot be hacked. Nothing can be changed on them. Stop. That's a conspiracy theory. You sound like Q-tard.
Into an electronic vote.
So I can play this. This goes on for about 3 or 4 more hours. And so all of a sudden in 2020, you weren't allowed to say that because Trump. So you're a chump. Most people in America are chumps and dupes to propaganda. And what's crazier is that they don't think they're propagandized. Americans are the most propagandized people. They got you to think the exact opposite. Hillary Clinton couldn't beat Donald Trump. And they made you think that a Russian and Putin somehow flipped votes so he could become president. And everyone still believes that. 67% of Democrats believe that. That was in 2017. So you're a chump if you believe the narratives. Whatever the narrative is in the news, it's not right. Whether it's Ukraine, whether it's COVID, whether it's Donald Trump's indictments, whatever it is, whether it's Black Lives Matter protests, whatever they're telling you, it's not the truth. ivermectin. Whatever they're telling you, it's not the truth. Hey, there's no early treatments for COVID. Whatever they're telling you, be skeptical of always, because they're lying. Just like they're lying now they're doing exactly what they said Trump was doing. They said Trump was prosecuting and going after, using the government and the prosecution and the Justice Department to go after his political enemies. That's exactly what they're doing to Donald Trump. You know, I didn't vote for Donald Trump. I'm not going to vote for Donald Trump. I don't support Donald Trump. But people need to realize what they're doing to Donald Trump, they would do to Cornel West or Bernie Sanders or any
Well,
person.
I don't totally agree with that. I agree that they would do some sketchy stuff to them. I mean, they did this stuff to Bernie, right? So they would do something sketchy. I don't know if they would follow the exact same playbook that they're using for Trump. I think that this is a very unique situation for them. I think that this just kind of fell in their lap and they were able to do this. Or it was all planned out. But I think that they would go after them in some way. But I don't know that they would do exactly what they're doing to Trump to them.
Inside the donor class that grabs power. That's what they'd be doing. Hey, come see us live on tour. We'll be in Salt Lake City, New York City, Pottstown, Pennsylvania, Stamford, Connecticut, Toledo, Detroit, St. Louis, Tampa, Boca Raton, and Orlando. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for all those tickets. See you there.
There you go, Jimmy. I left your plug in for you.